Welcome to On the Couch, a regular catch-up where we sit on the couch and discuss some of the issues and problems and hopefully solve some of the problems facing marketers today. Today I'm joined by our Trinity P3 sustainable marketing expert, Christopher Sewell. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Darren.
Look, Chris, I think it's very hard to ignore the fact that climate change is certainly back on the political agenda and certainly back in the minds of the public because, you're reading about it on social media and increasingly reading about it in the media generally. What's the impact, do you think, that this is having on marketing and what are marketers doing in response to this?
Politicians, there's actually not a lot going on. It's not to be worried about, but that's Australian politics, I think, today. Where the important thing from a marketer's point of view is the consumer. And the consumers, the recent poll I looked at the other day, 2/3 of consumers actually thought the government of the day was not doing enough about climate change. That's going to have an effect.
Well, what the consumer wants, the marketers have to respond to.
I think that's what they do for a living.
What do you think that will lead to? Because we have seen some big corporate global companies starting to respond to this and starting to offer or promise, make commitments to sustainable change.
Yeah, and they've also, a lot of major companies have also got us in a little bit of trouble last year, claiming things from an environmental aspect that they've actually been found out, which is not very good for their business. But from a positive point of view, yes, they're actually starting to step up and trying to claim that long-term sustainability from an environmental point of view as well.
So one of the big investments for marketers and advertisers is their media budget. I mean, we're still seeing often 40-50% of the total marketing budget going into media. Okay, so how does media, and all sorts of media, from direct mail to television to the internet, impact on climate change? Because I'd have to say a lot of people would say that the internet doesn't affect the climate.
It does, but in a small way.
So they're wrong.
So they're definitely wrong, Darren. But it's all started off, maybe 8 years ago when we were all recycling and we actually, we didn't like print because print was bad. We could see we were cutting down trees and that was bad for the planet. Stop printing, go online, we're going to solve the problems of the world. That's clearly not happened. And we need to actually understand that all channels, all activity we do on Earth really does have an effect on the climate, on the planet, what we do. So we have to understand that electronic media is actually driven by electricity, which is driven by mostly black and brown coal.
And it's a multiplier effect, isn't it? Because, you could send one letter out to someone printed on paper, but if you have 1 billion people all on their phone or on their computer, then that's a multiplier effect to carbon contribution, isn't it?
Yeah, if we're trying to get to the same message in an effective manner, definitely that wouldn't work at all. So the paper still has a place to play in marketing if it's done in a targeted and well-delivered manner.
So what was it, about 8 years ago you developed the CO2 Counter? Yep. Which, great idea, but probably before its time at the time.
Very much so.
But the CO2 Counter, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a way of being able to calculate and predict the CO2 contribution of different types of marketing activities, including media and all sorts of activities.
All types of media. So again, back to the paper example, everyone knew that was not necessarily good. It does have a high carbon footprint when looked at on an individual basis. But the question I asked myself before I started this was, what about everything else? What about your handheld devices? What about TV? What about radio? What about outdoor? What about when we light outdoor up at night to actually see it as we drive past in our cars down the freeway? What impact has that got on there? So the idea was to actually give people a tool that was independent of all those channels that would actually give them a really good benchmark to understand where they were today when they're actually going out to the marketplace.
So Chris, is there substantial differences in the CO2 outputs of the different types of media channels available to marketers?
Very much so. A handheld device is going to be minimal, whereas a paper is going to be much larger. Therefore, flight.
But say my 65-inch TV's LCD TV.
It's pretty good. They're LCD now, not plasma, so that's actually improved, and that's just the technology's changed. The market is still putting their TV commercials on there, but the devices have become more efficient, so that's a good thing.
But I'm sitting there with my TV set going, my computer on my lap, and my mobile phone here. I'm making 3 times the contribution, aren't I?
Yeah, that's right. The question you have to ask is, if there was no marketing on those devices, would you still be doing what you're doing? But that's the big one, actually, we get challenged about quite a bit. But some of those things wouldn't be there.
But I disagree, because marketers are actually, through media, buying to have the right to access that.
That's right.
It's not whether I would use it. I'm doing the things that I normally do. The marketer, the advertiser, is effectively renting that space. And so shouldn't they be taking the responsibility for that contribution?
100%. Look at a newspaper. We buy the real estate, a quarter page, half page within that real estate. And therefore, the market would clearly take responsibility for that piece of paper. The same thing would be with a 30-second TV commercial. Same thing should be when that pop-up comes on your computer. They should be taking responsibility for the carbon contribution of that display, of that ad.
Okay, so if every media has, or every media channel has different CO2 contributions, does that mean that there is an opportunity for advertisers to be able to optimise against CO2 emissions, their mix and choice of channels in their media planning against audience delivery?
Yes.
Okay, so we know they currently use things like gross rating points for television to optimise. They use cost per thousand to optimise a lot of media channels. Are you saying that the CO2 counter is an opportunity to actually also optimise CO2 and therefore effectively eliminate the waste within your media plan?
We look at the cost per thousand is one of the ones that we're looking at here, but that ignores, you can actually have something that's very, very cheap but goes to lots and lots and lots of different people, and it's wasted. Now, in any industry, marketing, media is the same. It's an industry. We want to eliminate waste. It's actually not being viewed the same way, but if we view it from a carbon point of view, as of today, we actually need to eliminate that waste to become more effective when we deliver those messages. So we're not talking about don't advertise. We're talking about when you do advertise, also understand the effect from a carbon point of view you're having on the environment if you just scattergun approach. Let's make it as targeted and effective as possible. Therefore, that will be better for us all.
Okay, so if an advertiser was able to optimise their media choices with their agency based on CO2 contribution, what would be the benefit that they would achieve beyond feeling good that they're making less impact on the environment?
I think they'll be able to be more comfortable with their claim around being a sustainable, environmentally friendly business, because they're not only measuring their factory, they're also measuring when they take their factory's goods and services out to the public. So they've got the whole, I suppose the whole boundary is a lot wider than it is currently. They're just ignoring that, saying it's someone else's problem, it's their problem. They're actually responsible for those goods. It's also going to be linked to cost. They're actually going to save money as they actually have the conversation with their media partners to actually tighten up on the way they go to market. It's only become more targeted, more effective. It's going to be low carbon, but it's got to be low cost as well as we continue to work on.
That's a major benefit, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because what you're actually doing is using CO2 contribution, carbon contribution, as a measure of activity. If that activity doesn't stack up to audience delivery, then you're effectively wasting a huge amount of investment.
And what an easier conversation to have with your suppliers to say, hi, we want to reduce our carbon, as opposed to, hi, we want to get our prices down on this.
Yeah.
It's a far more engaging conversations, and the media companies become carbon consultants. They actually talk about this as well. So it's a win-win from both sides.
That's an amazing opportunity, Chris, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
And look, thank you for joining us on the Couch. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Trinity P3, and stay in touch. We'll have another one coming up very soon. Thank you.